In 1748 Paris, a strange law quietly made potatoes illegal on pain of prison, not for being poisonous or even for being ugly. No, the French elite believed potatoes could drive you mad. If this sounds ridiculous, here's the real twist. This vegetable would go from banned menace to fueling revolutions and saving millions from starvation. But the deeper story isn't just about food. It's about fear, power, and how the humble potato nearly broke France's social order. So, why did France try to erase the potato, and what happened when that plan failed? Let's dig up the dirt. Imagine a food so controversial, doctors and priests publicly denounced it. The year is 1748, and France has just recovered from a famine, but suspicion is everywhere. Enter the potato, a strange root from South America, recently smuggled across oceans by Spanish explorers. To the French elite, potatoes were suspicious, unknown, ugly, and worst of all, not even mentioned in the Bible. And if the Bible didn't approve, well, what business did potatoes have in a proper French kitchen? But potatoes weren't just culinary outcasts. They were accused of spreading leprosy. Doctors like Parmentier, who would later become the potatoes champion, were told as students that potatoes might rot your internal organs. The real kicker? These beliefs stuck for nearly a century. But peel back the fear, and you see a society terrified of change. Food was political. Bread was France's lifeblood, the symbol of order itself. But potatoes threatened the monopoly of the grain industry, the backbone of noble fortunes. If peasants could survive on potatoes, who needed the bakers, the millers, the tax collectors? Here's what most people get wrong. Banning potatoes wasn't about health. It was about control. By the 1770s, disaster struck again. Famine returned, and suddenly, potatoes didn't seem so bad. Enter Antoine-Augustin Parmentier, scientist, prisoner of war, and unlikely potato evangelist. Captured by Prussians, Parmentier survived on potatoes in prison, then returned home convinced they could save France. But the French public wasn't buying it, literally. Here's the genius move. Parmentier planted potatoes on the outskirts of Paris and hired armed guards to protect them. At night, he told the guards to look the other way, inviting curious peasants to steal the forbidden crop. Suddenly, everyone wanted what they couldn't have. Within years, potatoes became a food of the people. The irony? The same crop, once blamed for disease and disorder, became a lifeline in crisis. During the Revolution, potatoes helped feed the starving masses, while bread grew scarce. Suddenly, the potato was patriotic, celebrated with feasts, parades, and even potato-themed hats. And yet, the fear never fully disappeared. In rural France, old stories lingered. Potatoes as devil's food, harbinger of storms, even a tool for witches. What's the real lesson here? Potatoes weren't just a food. They were a threat to the old order. They exposed how fragile society's certainties about health, class, and what counts as proper really are. The catch? Every generation finds its own potato, the thing it fears, bans, or mocks, until it needs it. So next time someone calls a food or an idea dangerous, ask who benefits from keeping it off the table. Now flip that around. How did the potatoes story end up shaping not just France, but the world's dinner plates? By the 19th century, potatoes had conquered Europe, ending famines and fueling industrial cities. But they also set the stage for new disasters, like the Irish potato famine, when monoculture turned a miracle food deadly. So the potato's legacy is double-edged: savior and destroyer, scapegoat and hero. And it all began with a paranoid ban rooted in fear, not fact. If you want to understand what a society truly fears, don't look at their monsters. Look at what they try to keep off your plate. And remember, every forbidden food is a clue to hidden power. So, did France ever truly learn to love the potato? Not right away. Old prejudices lingered for decades, even after the famine, even after the revolution. But today, France eats 50 kilos of potatoes per person per year, the ultimate revenge of the vegetable once banned as madness. So next time you eat French fries, remember, you're biting into a centuries-old war story, and you're on the winning side. But here's the closing twist. The potato's struggle isn't unique. Across history, every food we love was once feared, banned, or demonized. The story of the potato is the story of progress, paranoia, and the people who risked ridicule for a better meal. And next time you wonder why a food is missing from the menu, ask, who's really afraid of what's on your plate? If you're hungry for more food myths and how they shaped empires, stick around. The next story takes us to the ban on tomatoes in Italy, where the Vatican called them poison apples. But that's a recipe for another revolution. But let's rewind to the moment potatoes first crossed the Atlantic. Spanish conquistadors searching for El Dorado stumbled on a tuber that looked more like a misshapen stone than a treasure. They didn't know it then, but that ugly root was feeding entire Incan armies at high altitude, keeping empires marching where wheat would have wilted. Back in Europe, potatoes were first grown as a botanical curiosity, something to look at, not to eat. In fact, some aristocrats displayed potatoes in their salons, like exotic pets, never suspecting they'd soon be fighting for their survival. The potato's chemistry made it even more suspicious. Unlike grains, it grew underground, hidden, mysterious, impossible to track from seed to harvest. And then came the French medical establishment, eager to flex newfound scientific muscles. In 1767, the Paris Faculty of Medicine issued a stern warning. Potatoes, they claimed, were flatulent and unsuitable for humans. The result? Potatoes were fed to pigs and prisoners, never gentlemen or ladies. But here's a twist. Those pigs and prisoners, they got healthier. Parmentier noticed French jails had fewer outbreaks of scurvy and dysentery than nearby villages. That was a clue, ignored by almost everyone. Sometimes the outsider is the first to spot the truth. The aristocracy clung to their bread, so much so that in 1788, when a hailstorm wiped out the wheat harvest, bread riots broke out within days. Yet, in villages that grew potatoes, families stayed fed. Quietly, a revolution was simmering underground. And when Parmentier wanted to win hearts and minds, he didn't just rely on reverse psychology. He threw lavish potato banquets for the elite, inviting Benjamin Franklin and even the future king. He served potato bread, potato soup, even potato ice cream, daring the most powerful people in France to taste the future. Some guests left unconvinced. Others became instant converts, spreading the word to their own kitchens, estates, and armies. The real tipping point? The French Revolution. With chaos in the streets, bread lines grew longer, and potatoes, once despised, became the only thing left to eat. The government even issued pamphlets praising the potato as a bulwark against hunger and tyranny. Suddenly, the same street vendors who'd hidden their potatoes years earlier now sold them openly, with pride. But suspicion lingered, especially in the countryside. Old wives' tales twisted the potato into a scapegoat for every ill. Thunder, crop blight, even childhood misbehavior. In Brittany, if a storm ruined your harvest, neighbors whispered that you'd angered the spirit of the potato. And yet, with each passing year, the evidence piled up. Potatoes didn't just feed the hungry, they changed the game. By 1800, France's potato harvests could feed millions. The Paris police even switched to potato starch for their uniforms, cheaper and more durable than linen. That's right, the potato literally became a badge of authority. And while France celebrated its new staple, others saw the danger of putting all their eggs, or tubers, in one basket. Ireland's reliance on a single potato variety, the lumper, would prove catastrophic when blight swept in. 1 million dead, 2 million forced to flee. The potato, once savior, became a grim reminder that no food is invulnerable. But here's the paradox. Even after famine, countries doubled down on potatoes. Why? Because by then, it was too late to imagine life without them. Today, the world grows over 370 million tons of potatoes every year, enough to feed every person on Earth a daily serving for months. French fries, vodka, instant mash, the potato is everywhere, woven into the fabric of daily life. But every time you bite in, you're tasting centuries of resistance, suspicion, and ultimately, adaptation. The next time you hear about a food panic, whether it's about plant-based burgers or lab-grown meat, remember the potato. Ask yourself, is this about health, or is it about who gets to decide what's on the table? Because sometimes the forbidden food is the only thing standing between order and chaos. And the story isn't over. New foods will always show up, wearing the mask of danger, until someone, somewhere, is hungry enough to take the first bite. So, what's your potato? What's the flavor you've been told to fear, or the idea you've been warned against? History's menu is full of surprises, and the only way to taste them is to question who's setting the table.